Good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg Schenk with the Schenk Company in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm here to welcome you to our special guest today, Rebecca Milnes from Avenue Wellness in Columbus, Ohio. I am fortunate to have her on the podcast. I'm actually a past patient of Avenue Wellness, and Rebecca and I have been fortunate enough to work together as well. So I thought she would be a great person to educate you a little bit on what's going on in the market, how her experiences were with an exclusive tenant rep broker, the difference between a listing agent and a tenant rep broker, and some other things going on in both the real estate market and the investment property market here. So welcome, Rebecca. I'm excited to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about you and your company and what's going on.
Thanks very much, Greg. Very nice to be with you this afternoon. My family owns the Avenue Wellness Center in Hilliard, Ohio, or Columbus. And it is a business which is focused on providing hyperbaric oxygen for the assistance in healing bodies. We do hyperbaric oxygen and a number of other things. These are kind of new therapies that have been developed in the past 20 or 30 years, which are not regularly known in the community, but are very, very effective. And they are not flim-flam. They are science-based treatments or science-based technologies which are used. And so we were fortunate. You came in and saw us and we worked with you on some things. They are just absolutely amazing. We got into it because my daughter had a stroke and she was only 41, and she was told that this is the way she was going to be the rest of her life. She had seizures, she had loss of balance, she fell and had a couple of concussions, she had cognitive issues, she had memory problems. She was about 65% functional, and her neurologist said, you know, it will either resolve or it won't. And 2.5 years after, it had not. And they just said, welcome to the new you. And she wasn't willing to accept that. And she started searching, and she found that hyperbaric oxygen actually creates new stem cells throughout the body, which can go into the brain as well as to other places. And it will help to resolve stroke damage. So today, 4 years later, she is now, I'd say, about 97% healed.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. So when she found that out, and then my son subsequently got involved also, they both said to me, why does no one know about this? And I said, I don't know. I never heard of it either. And we decided it was our goal and our responsibility to inform people about it and to make it available and to show people how much of a positive impact it can make on your life. So that's
well, I remember when I was there, and it's been 2 years now since I was there, you had the only private one in the state. Is that still the case?
No, there are private ones. There are other private ones in Columbus, but they all vary in terms of their intensity and the quality of their oxygen. But many of them are being used just for cosmetic purposes. And ours, we have what I call a concierge approach, because we really work very, very closely with people to determine what is their overall health level, what is their goal, what are they trying to reach. And we see people on a regular basis. So we know what their sleep habits are. We know what if they're drinking enough water. We can see them on a day-to-day basis and recognize when somebody is either progressing or not progressing and make adjustments. And that's unique, because you go into a doctor's office, they see you, they prescribe something, they say, we'll see you in 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And maybe you call in and try and talk to someone, but there's no one there who's observing you every single day and asking you, how do you feel? You know, how's your energy level? How are you eating? How is your sleep? Are you angry? Are you depressed? You know, what's going on with you? And that's what we do, is we focus on the whole person and try to address whether or not it's water or nutrition or supplements or, you know, any type of thing. So that makes us unique in terms of how we position hyperbaric and red light therapy and pulsed electromagnetic field therapy and things like that. We look at the whole person. It's very integrative.
That's phenomenal. And having been a past patient, I can certainly agree with that. I mean, most people hate going to the doctor. They feel like a number. There's not a lot of personal caring. And I felt very cared for there as an ex-jock that's heard about everything that you can hurt in your body. If you remember, I had a lot of different things
Yeah.
going on. And I'm happy to say that, a lot of them are a lot better. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And obviously, one of my former surgeons is who personally introduced me to you 2.5 years ago, Ray Tessner, who had done ankle surgery on me back 30 plus years ago. Let's talk about before I got involved and you were starting this business and you purchased this building in Hilliard. Tell us about, your process and your experience with all of that and why you chose to buy rather than lease. But tell us all of that. How was the process? How was the experience? And how was your decision making made so we can educate the audience a little bit about this?
It really was just a lot of hoof work on my own part. I looked at every listing I could find. I drove around areas. I had some target spots that I was interested in looking at. But in the end, it came down to, this is terrible. I was looking at Ohio State to be around the athletic complex because we can do a lot of work with broken bones and tendons and things like that. I looked at the short north, I looked at those areas. And in the end, this piece of property was available and I could move into it without doing almost anything to it and immediately get my equipment in. And there was a study that was published in July of 22 that said that hyperbaric oxygen was very successful in treating long COVID. And it was published around the world. And this company was starting up a facility in Florida, and they were charging $62,000 for a 60-day treatment plan that was designed to get rid of long COVID. And they were flying in people from all over the world to this. And we had been working on our process. We had our equipment ordered. It was just about ready to be delivered. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my word, that's outrageous. First of all, I knew that that's the study that they were relying on was a 40-day study, not a 60-day study. So I knew long COVID could be treated in 40 days, in 40 treatments. And secondly, I knew that there was a way to decrease that time down to 20 days. And I knew that we could do it for about $4,000, not $62,000. And
Wow.
so I called up a friend of mine who used to be a commercial broker. And I said, get me in that building. And he got me in and I made an offer that day and we signed the contract the next day. So, after doing all this research for the other areas, trying to find the location, I finally decided if people were going to come from outside the Columbus area, driving 20 minutes from the airport or driving an hour and a half from Cincinnati wasn't going to make any difference. If I wasn't going after the Ohio State athletes who needed to be in close proximity, Hilliard was just fine. So that's how we ended up here.
Got it. Okay. There's part of that I actually hadn't heard before. So that was educational for me as well. So you did, sounds like a lot of it on your own.
Yes.
And so you kind of lucked in that this building didn't need any build out. And that's something we're going to talk about here in a few minutes because build out is a huge issue with all of tenants these days. All right. So why don't you take it from there and how we connected and how I got involved to educate the audience on this.
Okay. Well, you were here and you do know Ray Tessner, and Ray Tessner is my medical director. So at a point, we have expanded. We have a lot of business coming in. And the one deficit of this building that I didn't consider when I bought it was that it has a lot of stairs. And I was not anticipating the number of people we would have that were unable to walk. They have neuropathy, they have a broken ankle, they have a back problem. They cannot walk upstairs. And so we're limited to a lot of our treatments being done on the first floor, which makes it more congested. So I thought, I need to find a place where we can have all of our treatment rooms on the first floor. So I went to Ray and I said, who's the best person for me to go to get some assistance in trying to locate property that would meet our needs? And he said, Greg Schenk. You've got to call Greg. He's the best. So I did. And you are.
Well, thank you. Well, I should say Ray and I owned a building God, I hate to say it's more than 25 years ago now that I helped him buy as an investment property, and I was a minor investor in that as well. But Ray, I met originally when he operated on my ankle way back in '86, so I've known him quite a long time. All right, so let's take it from there. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between a listing agent and a tenant rep broker and your experiences before you brought me on board when you were starting to look.
Well, I had done the same thing I was doing previously. I was going out looking at all the CBE listings, looking at all of the different commercial listings that are online, trying to find something, and I'd make calls. And quite frankly, a lot of the listing agents didn't take me seriously. I don't know why, but they didn't. And so I just got the runaround from a lot of them. And they would quote one thing, and then I'd say, okay, I'd like to talk more, let's see about getting this nailed down. And then all of a sudden, all the terms would change. And they're representing their client. They're not representing me. So that's when I started getting very frustrated. And that's when I went to Ray and said, who would you suggest I work through? Because the listing agents that I'm contacting to see these buildings are just, they don't have my best interest at heart. So that's how we made that choice. And then from the moment that I contacted you, and I said, gee, I should have thought of that. I know that that's what Greg does, but it just, I don't know why, I just didn't think of it. And from the moment I contacted you, you immediately sent me a multi-page listing, or asking me what my
a form, yeah.
A form asking me what my preferences are. What am I looking for? Am I looking for more space? Am I looking for newer facilities? Am I looking for larger facilities? Am I looking for a different location? What's the dynamic of the area that I want to be in? What are the demographics and everything? And no one asked me that before. No one ever asked what I was actually looking for, what was my goal, and what was I trying to accomplish. So you did that immediately, and then came up with some things. Said, I think I have some things that might interest you. I think there are some things that might match up with what your expectations are. So that was totally different.
Let's go over those two things just for a moment to educate people. Number one, the form that we have is on our website under shankcompany.com under Get Started. We actually have two forms, one for investors looking to buy investment property and one for users of space, whether they're leasing, buying, or building. And what we do is try to find out where you've been, where are you now, and where do you want to go? And the more details we get on that form, the quicker the process goes, the more time and money that we save someone. Basically, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why. How many square feet? What are the boundaries? What's the image like? The access like? The visibility like? What's the business like? Because chances are I don't know the business obviously as well as they do. So the better the picture is painted from that form, the more it helps me help the client save time and money in the process. Okay, so that's really it. And then the difference is that most people don't know between a listing agent and an exclusive tenant rep broker. I happen to be the only exclusive tenant rep broker in the city of Columbus, and I bound together with people all over the world to do the same thing. We have about 100 of us around the world in various cities, over 50 in the US, that work together to help our clients when they're in multi-markets. So for example, if Rebecca said, hey, next week I want to go to Austin, Texas, who do you know down there? I've got someone that's an expert there, like I'm an expert here. But the big difference, as Rebecca mentioned, is we exclusively represent her for her interest. It doesn't matter to us if they're downtown or in Marysville, we're going to get paid the exact same. And because we don't do listings, we spend a lot of time studying the market, and we know the brokers, we know the developers, we know what the costs are to help our clients save time and money in the process. All right, Rebecca, let's pick it up from here and talk about some of the choices and some of the issues and pitfalls we had while we were looking at those things.
Well, I think one of the main things was, and this is perhaps not necessarily naivete on my part, but I thought that a lot of the building owners would be more participatory in terms of getting the building up to what I would consider to be specs. Because when I had commercial property that I listed previously, I white boxed things. I knew that the electric was good. I knew that I knew what all the systems were doing, and that the codes were all enforced and everything. And there were places that I looked that the codes were not being met. There were things that were in violation of codes. And the expectation was that that was going to be mostly my responsibility to bring up. For example, bathrooms that aren't handicapped accessible. That's a code issue. Those bathrooms, if you're going to do anything to the building at all, you have to bring those things up. And those are very expensive items to do. There were electrical issues in one building that I looked at where there was a what do you call it? A mini split that was sitting over top, or there was a water heater that was positioned over top of a mini split. Well, you don't put water over top of an electrical appliance. And yet when I pointed that out, it's like, well, it's been there. We didn't do that, but you can correct it if you want. Well, so in the end, it came down to when I added up how much I figured I was going to have to put into their building, I was better off putting that money into my own building by retrofitting, by perhaps pushing out a wall or two, and just investing that in my building, which I already own, rather than putting that money in their building, which they own, and they're going to benefit because I upgraded the bathrooms, or I upgraded the lighting, or I upgraded the wiring, or so on. And that was what it came down to. So maybe it was naivete on my part. Maybe it was just the buildings that currently are available, but that's what I was faced with. And I just had to make the decision. And I finally said, I'm going to stay put and improve the building that I'm in.
Well, I think you made a good decision. Let me expand a little bit about that. Every property type is different on what building owners do. Every building owner is different.
Yes.
Do they have the capability, or do they want to invest money in the building? Has the property value gone up or gone down since they bought it? For example, in downtown Columbus, some buildings are worth 50 cents on the dollar compared to what they were worth 5 years ago, because of the Black Lives Matters riots, because of the COVID stay at home, because of insurance going up 40%, and because of the lack of demand of office downtown. Okay, so every area, every city, totally different. Retail buildings, and when you first mentioned, white boxing it, that's a term for retail for people out there. Usually you have 4 painted drywalls, a drop ceiling, and a single restroom that the landlord is giving you. And then it's the tenant's responsibility to finish their particular use. For office, and Rebecca's use is really a pseudo medical / office, is a little unique, where most office space owners are offering an allowance based off of 4 things. And this is very important. You may want to take a note on this. First, it's the credit of the tenant. Good credit gets you everything today. Bad credit, you get nothing. Plain and simple. Why? The landlord's got to feel comfortable, and their lender has to feel comfortable, specifically if they're taking a loan to do the tenant improvements. So the credit, the length of term of the lease. The more expensive, the more leases they're going to want. The longer the lease, they're going to want you to sign. Some of my medical clients signed 15-year leases to make the numbers work. Okay, so credit, length of term, the amount of space. The bigger the space, the more dollar allowance you're probably going to get. And then that cost of the build out. And build out cost today, as you mentioned earlier, has gotten extremely expensive. It could be $50 to $150 a foot. We've had some medical space that's over $200 a foot. And I'll give you a great example from 15 years ago. I helped a kidney dialysis center in Dayton, and their build out cost more than the building was worth. And the owner said, why don't I just give you the building? And he was joking, but not joking, that he did the lease because it was a good credit long-term tenant. But the build out cost, even then, anything to do with plumbing, with water, with electricity, if you're running it a long way, is a big expense today. Now, yesterday I did a podcast with a warehouse developer, and he said the exact same thing about how much it's costing now to build warehouse. So it's not just office or medical cost that's gone up. It's across the board. Costs have gone up. The ground has gone up. Labor's gone up. Cement's gone up. Steel's gone up. Plumbing, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. So the big issue in Avenue's case was the difference between what the landlord would offer and what it was going to cost to do the build out was a big amount of money, over $200,000, if I remember correctly. And it was a good idea not to do it because she didn't own the building. Obviously, it's up to each individual tenant to decide, do I want to take on that risk? What's the business like? How long am I going to be there? Is the location a long-term location for me? And how much is it going to help my business grow? And if the answer isn't a heck of a lot, then it's probably not worth doing. So today, if you can find a location with very minor build out like you did for your first location, it's obviously going to save you time to get in quicker because permits can take a great deal of time. Finding the right contractor can take a great deal of time because a lot of them are busy or they're not going to want to work on a smaller project, or they don't have the know-how to work on specialty projects. And that's something I've experienced a great deal in my career, is not having the right contract. They just didn't know the right thing. But would you agree with that kind of in summation?
Absolutely. The other thing that for me was, I'm 73 years old. They wanted me to sign a 7-year lease. Okay, in 7 years, I'm going to be 80 years old. If I put that money in my own building, I can turn around and sell the building. If I put that money into a leased building, I'm either going to have to break the lease or find someone to sublet or find someone that I can sell my business to that's capable of taking on and will be approved to take over the lease. And I just thought that was a lot bigger risk than I needed to do. I put the money in here, I can turn around, I can sell the building. So
Yeah.
hopefully I'll make a wise investment and not, over improve the building, but I have a much better chance of recouping my money. And quite honestly, I mean, it just seems silly. I thought I would be 80 years old by the time that lease is over. I'm not sure I want to
Well,
do that.
fortunately, you look and feel a lot younger, but you bring up a great point. Exit strategy, legacy. A lot of people don't think about that when they're leasing or buying space. If they own a building or a company, we always talk about having a strategic plan. Too many companies are too busy working in the business instead of taking a step back and working on it. So the better we understand those short and long-term goals, the better we can advise on that. So we're not making decisions that's going to cause you stress or cost you money in the short or the long term. Okay, I think we've gone through that enough. I know you've done some separate personal development, and I think our audience would be interested in that, as general or specific as you'd want to get, because some of them may want to take the risk, be a developer as well. And can you share your experience with that?
Well, I did a monopoly down in German Village, and I always kind of think it's really funny. I bought a building at the corner of Thurman and Jaeger, which is right in the heart of German Village, and it had been vacant for many years. And it was not able to be developed really because it had no parking. And the German Village Commission wouldn't permit things to go in because there were no parking spaces. But I just loved the building. I thought this has to be used for something, and it's in such a great area. And so I kind of thought I was going to put something up in the front and then do a really funky residential piece in the back, which was about 3,000 square feet. Got in and found out it had the original tin ceilings. It had a speakeasy downstairs. It had been used during the Depression. They had during Prohibition, they had a speakeasy and they had tunnels down into German Village, and they had a door which locked. We found locked liquor cabinets and all kinds of stuff. So it was really cool. And, we were just working on cleaning it up. And then a piece of property came available 2 doors down. And it had a parking garage. I mean, just a garage for 2 cars. But then it had a beauty shop, and so it had 5 spaces out in the back. So I bought that building, and I put a couple of businesses in there and had that for a while. And then lo and behold, the piece of property in between came up for sale. And all of a sudden, I had 6 addresses. I had 210, 212, 214, 216, 220, and 222 Thurman Avenue. And I had monopoly, because I had all the spaces behind, and I was able to create 18 parking spaces.
Wow.
And then I turned around and sold the complex altogether. So that was fun.
How long ago did you do that?
I started that in 2010 and sold it in 2015.
Wow. So you did all that in 5 years, just getting through the German Village Commission.
Oh, that was a
Would have
joy.
given, if I had hair, it would have given me gray hair, because I've heard nothing but nightmares with
It was,
dealing with that. But that's very exciting. So you took a lot of risk. Number one, you went up against something that's not easy, from all my friends that live in German Village experience
yeah.
on doing that. But it sounds like the risk was well worth it for you.
Fox in the Snow is now the primary tenant, and I actually approached them when I was working on it. And that's who I wanted in there. I wanted a gourmet coffee, donut, pastry place. And so I worked with them a number of times, and they actually signed the contract like the week after I sold the property. But it was fine, because that's who I really wanted in there, and they've made a very good success there. So that's,
Yes, I've been in there since. So you sold it to a private investor, and then they put the tenant in?
yes. Mhm.
Got it. Okay, so there, folks, is the risk reward scenario about anything in real estate. Do you have the vision? Do you have the risk? Do you have the money? Okay, and we don't want to get into her personal financials, but with everything, it's how much cash do you have? How much cash are you comfortable investing in a project? How much cash is king? How much money can you borrow? How much money are you comfortable borrowing, and for how long? Okay, and as someone that's also invested in things for over 25 years, you have to ask yourself that for each and every scenario. And when there isn't a tenant involved, most of the time the lenders are not going to give you as good of terms and conditions, no matter how good your credit is, no matter how much your net worth is. I don't know if your experience was that way, but the fact that you were able to play Monopoly and put all three together is phenomenal success story, especially in that area.
I had another one also that was really cool. There was a fourplex on Stewart, outside of German Village, but still in the German Village area. And I drove past one day, and I was looking for another investment, and I saw this fourplex. It was all vacant, kind of run down, and a sign had just gone up. So I called and I said, I'm interested in seeing this. And I called my realtor there at that time. I called one of my local realtor friends, and I said, get me in. And again, I went in, I made an offer, and the next day we had a contract signed. So great, I'm in the building, you know, I've got it. And I go over to inspect, and the next door neighbor says, hey, that's really cool. So did the library contact you? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, the library has this whole area slated for development. They're buying everything along Parsons and all the way back over here to this alley. And I said, no, I didn't hear anything. So I call up the library, and I said, are you doing something on Parsons? And I said, I've got this property on Stewart. She goes, how did you get that? I said, a sign went up. And it was caught in that period of time when nobody knew who owned or who had the mortgage on something. And I bought it. And she goes, that's the last piece in our block. We have to have that. I go, make me an offer. So 4 months later, I walked away with a check. The only thing I did was strip everything out of it, because they were tearing it down. So I took every electrical box, every toilet, every piece of metal I could get out of there, we took, and then we used in other apartments and things that we were redoing. But that was a real fun one, because I had no idea whatsoever. Talk about dumb luck.
Well, it takes a little luck in this business, but the bigger thing, as I'm thinking after hearing you with this, is the vision that you had for this particular area. Most people don't have, and that's why it's important to, to partner with an expert, someone like ourselves. But the fact that you had that's just mind-boggling, phenomenal. I've had a couple situations like that. I'll give one really quick example. I helped Grange Insurance, was a client of mine way back when, and they had a drive-through claim thing on High Street, and they wanted to get rid of it. And this was back when I did listings in the 80s. So this is how long ago this was. And put it on the market. And in one day, I had an investor buy it, paid cash. And he had a bank in his back pocket, Fifth Third Bank, that he put in there. So they were very happy with me. About 10 years later, they were trying to expand their campus. Since then, it's really grown. They built a lot more office buildings. They had two neighbors with houses that they'd been trying to get to, just like your scenario you just talked to, for 2 years. they've been contacting these people. They didn't get anywhere. And they said, Greg, can you help us? 30 days. I got them to sell both the properties. And so they were happier than a pig in shit, to say the least, on there. So sometimes it's lucky. Sometimes, it's knowing how to work with people on that. Okay, before we wrap up, Rebecca, is there anything else about what's going on in the real estate market now or in the business world that you'd like to educate our audience with?
I just think you have to be more cautious now. There's just a lot that's going on. You really have to choose your area well. With interest rates, the volatility, not knowing if they're going to go up or go down. If you're not a cash buyer, you've just got to make sure that they say you make your money at the bottom, not at the top. You make your money when you buy. If you have to buy it properly. If you don't buy it properly, it almost doesn't make any difference what you sell it for. So you don't want to overpay. You got to do it at the beginning.
So it's, again, funny you said that, because Steve Harmon, who I had on yesterday, said almost the exact same thing. If you can buy something under replacement cost, you're probably pretty good. It's pretty good to get an accurate appraisal today because of so many factors that are going on and how fast the market's moving. I will say, when I got into this business and the first property I ever bought, interest rates were 17%. If you remember Jimmy Carter way back in the day. So comparatively speaking, our interest rates are still very cheap. There's residential people for home buyers that are buying down loans and offering 4.5%, believe it or not. So there's some residential areas that are good. The other good thing is Central Ohio is the second fastest growing community in the entire United States. You could almost point any direction, and it's growing, and our land costs are going through the roof. You might have seen in New Albany some data centers going up where they've paid over $400,000 an acre for basically farm ground, which blew me away. Where I live in Upper Arlington, there's no lots. People are tearing down homes for the lots for over $500,000 for a 60-year-old ranch house on a fairly small lot. So I think that bodes well for most investors and businesses in Central Ohio.
Well, if you bought at the right time, I bought a house 2.5 years ago that I paid $60,000 for on a half an acre, 100-year-old old farmhouse. Now that house is worth $210,000. I wouldn't pay $210,000 for it, but I was happy to pay $60,000. So that's the reason I'm saying you've really got to be cautious, because prices have gone up. You have to look for that value. You have to look for the one that is undervalued. And you have to be willing to do some work, because just coincidentally, my LLC, the name of my LLC is Visionary Vortex.
I love it.
Because my kids say I'm like a whirling dervish. I'm just like, let's do this.
Well, in our brief time this afternoon, you've obviously shown that. And obviously having an expert that knows the market inside and out, something I'm very proud of, studying the market as much as we do on everyday business. But Rebecca, thank you so much for your wisdom and your time today. Let everyone know how they can get a hold of you and your company if they need your services.
We are the avenuewellness.com, and it's AVENU, no E, because the focus is on you. So the avenuewellness.com.
That's wonderful. Well, have a wonderful afternoon. And if there's other topics you'd like to hear, please let me know. Greg Shank, shankcompany.com. Thank you. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon. And I look forward to doing another one with you in the near future.
Thank you so much.